What's up, guys? We're coming up on another big bass bash, so I figured I'd kind of make a little bit of video here, just talking about the current lake level conditions, fishing in general. If you haven't been down, give you a little bit of a heads up of what is happening at Lake of the Ozarks. So first thing we'll talk about is our lake level. We're sitting at 655.7 when I'm making this. So the lake is going to be on a slow and steady rise from here on out as we lead into Memorial Day weekend. They want to get that lake level up for all the pleasure boaters. And our water temperature is going to be, depending on where you're at on the lake, it's going to be mid to upper 50s, even into the low 60s, I would say. So you got to remember, Lake the Ozarks is a huge lake. It's 90 miles, and it very, very different from the lower end by the dam, by Bagnell Dam all the way up to, say, Truman Dam, which is, basically a river up there. And the water clarity is going to change a lot there as well. So you're obviously going to have that warmer water up near the Truman Dam side, up the river, and you're going to have a little bit cooler water down by Bagnell Dam because it's a much deeper and much cleaner down on that side of the lake. So leading into that as well is the water clarity. Down by the dam, crazy clear. It's like 5, I would say almost 6 feet of visibility in spots like out in the main lake. Now you can get back into some creeks and stuff, especially after we had gotten some rain and found water visibility that was maybe 2.5 feet or so down by the dam area. But the further that you went down the lake, so say you go down by the toll bridge area, you get a little bit less visibility. You go even further down, say around the 25 to 30 mile marker, you get less. And it's going to continue that way as you go up towards the river, or you go up into the river. And then of course, if you go into the back of the creeks, like you go back up to the river arm, so you got the Gravelway, you got the Glaze, you got the Nanguas. If you go far enough up into those, some of those areas, they get runoff and stuff. So after some rainfall, it'll kind of muddy that water up, and it's gonna give you that stained water if that's what you're looking for this time of the year. So I know the big topic of the Big Bass Bash is gonna be the spawn. I'm gonna show you some examples and stuff on a map, like what I'm talking about, and some of these things like spawn pockets or flats and stuff, or drains within those areas, just to help you visualize it a little bit more. But I know if you go way up the river, the fish, they're always quite a bit ahead of the fish down by the dam. Just a shallower system up there, so things naturally just progress a little bit sooner up there than they do on that deep clear water. So if you want to fish for certain very, very shallow, you want to fish laydowns and things like that, but not necessarily sight fish as much, going up the river is going to be a good bet for you. Now you do have to keep in mind with the weather coming up here, it looks like we're going to have maybe a cold front coming Friday, and that is going to take some of those fish that are shallow, and they can make them a little bit finicky, and it actually can cause them to slide out as well too. But if you like to sight fish, I think the lower end is going to be the place that you might want to be, just get a little bit of that clear water. But I can't say for certain that there's a lot of fish pulling up to spawn. I know that there's some crappie and stuff pulling up, and I've heard up the river, up the lake, that fish are really starting to spawn, starting to pull up. The bass are, but on the lower end, I can't say that for certain. I do think we got the full moon coming up. I think it's like the 23rd or something. So not long after the bash. I'm a big believer in the moon, either being a full moon or new moon, causing fish to kind of pull up. And I think that's going to time up really, really well for that time period. I think during the event, you are going to be able to find some fish on beds, or find some fish cruising around or thinking about, spawning. And maybe that's something you could capitalize on. So I'll show you on a map some of the areas, kind of what my general strategy would be, and then I'll talk about the baits a little bit. The biggest thing about the baits, though, is it is very, very wide open right now, and it's going to continue to head in that direction, which basically means use what you have confidence in. There's many different things that are working. You can throw your crankbaits, moving baits, spinner baits, things of that nature in that stained or a little bit more muddy water, and do very well on it. You can throw your jigs, your plastics, and pick apart docks, the fronts of docks, behind them. You can throw your Carolina rigs and stuff, your shaky heads, whatever you want to throw. Your top water is going to be really coming into play here. So you have a lot of options basically just fish we have confidence in. But let's look at some of the mapping real fast, and I'll just kind of show you some of the things that I'm talking about. All right, so we have Navionics pulled up here, and my main strategy is going to be fishing spawn pockets or areas leading into it, whether that's like a flat secondary point, some main lake stuff, and the back of creeks. So essentially what I'm going to be looking for are little spawn pockets and or rock transitions leading into those. So you could say, there's baseball sized rock or something and it's leading into smaller, more pea gravel type stuff. Those are areas that I'm going to focus on. So when I say spawn pocket, this is kind of what I'm talking about. You can go into any of these little things that jut off, just these little shallow areas. They become very flat. You're usually going to find that smaller sized rock and these types of things that jut off. So these general areas in and around the docks is where those fish are going to like to spawn. And you can also have things out in the guts of these, so brush piles or sometimes concrete blocks or whatever that these fish will relate to before they slide up into the shallow area. And this is another good example right here of just like a little indentation. So you have your steeper bank, zoomed out a little far. So you have your steeper bank that comes in here. These fish can use that as a travel corridor wherever they want to go leading into the back of these creeks if they're going to, but you're also going to have fish that are just going to stop up in here, and this is where they're going to spawn, or this is where they're going to hang out. So these little indentations, they can definitely give you some really good fish, and oftentimes with this, you're going to have a drain of some sort. So just think water's going to run off this into the lake, so you're left with a little indentation in there, and a lot of times that's where those fish are going to sit. So that's going to be one strategy of mine, is just you're fishing your spawn pockets and stuff. They don't have to be in the very back like this. They could be like these that come off the side. You have all these creeks, just little small indentations. Like I said, you're looking for the flatter style stuff with the smaller rock. So that is one thing you can look at. Then another thing you can look at is just large flats in the backs of creeks. So pick any creek, like this is a creek, this one is, literally pick any of these, and you can see that you have just these very large flats that come all the way across it with not a whole lot there. So in those type of areas, you got the same setup. You have this, which is an indentation within this large flat. You can have little isolated brush piles and stuff out there that fish can hold on to and sit just in those areas. And in those type of situations, I'm usually throwing some sort of moving bait, whether it's like a square bill. You could throw spinner baits and stuff back there. You're generally going to have a little bit more watercolor, so you can get away with those reaction baits and usually do okay. And it's a bonus if you have some wind hitting in those areas. Another good bait for those is like a super fluke, just rigged weightless. So get back in these large areas and fish them thoroughly, fan cast, and I think you have a good chance of catching some nice fish. And one thing to keep in mind is, since the lake is not at full pool, these are going to be quite a bit shallower back here than what like this contour map is going to say right here. So keep that in mind when you get there, and you can kind of use your eyes and figure out where the drain is going or where the ditch is going that kind of flows through these areas, and sometimes follow it out and find some fish that are relating to that. The next thing that I'm going to focus on, if those two things are not panning out for me, is a good old trusty main lake. So whether that's a bluff end, something like this, very sharp, steep bank, and then you have an abrupt depth change where this kind of comes out nice little flat. Basically these areas where it's adjacent to extremely deep water seems to always hold big fish. Even when you have a lot of fish that are pushed up, spawning and shallow, there's always going to be fish out on the main lake. Not all these fish spawn at the same time, so they're in different phases. Kind of like I said, the fish that are way up the river area, these fish are ahead of the fish that are, say, on the lower end or mid-lake. But that is strictly because the upper end like this is much shallower. If we zoom in here, you can see the main river channel is only 26 feet deep, and then you get these large expansive flats that just lead into these little cuts and stuff. So that's very popular up in these areas, and just flipping around isolated docks or isolated timber up here is a great spot. Like these little docks in here, you have stumps. So I expect for anybody to be fishing up on the river portion that they're primarily going to be fishing very shallow. Now, one thing to keep in mind, like I had talked about, is if we do get this cold front that's kind of projected to come in and you get nighttime temperatures down into the 40s, say, that can take some of these fish, we'll zoom back in here, that say are, they're slid up. Let's just say they're up behind this dock right here, and they're very, very shallow. You've been catching them flipping or something. Well, you get that cold weather, this very shallow water is going to cool off much quicker, so that sometimes it's going to force them to slide out and sit, underneath the dock or out here if there's some brush or something. That's where those fish can just slide out, and then when they're comfortable again, they can ease back up into that shallow water. So those are just a few quick examples of kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking, spawn pockets or main lake bluff end stuff, or like a flat point, or the backs of the creeks. Hopefully that helps you get a little insight of kind of what's going on at the lake. But just remember, it is a very crowded weekend, and a lot of people are going to be fishing. So take your time, be safe. You kind of have to get in the mindset that you're going to be fishing behind somebody else, but that doesn't necessarily matter. Not everybody's going to be doing the same thing. You're going to have some people that are going to be really focused on the shallow stuff. You're going to have some people that are going to be focused on the stuff that is off the bank a little bit more, maybe a little bit more in the guts or the front side of the dock. So if you see a boat in an area, don't just automatically assume that, I'm not going to catch anything because somebody already fishes, because that is not true. And even if you are doing the same thing, I've seen it a lot. Sometimes it is literally just a timing thing. You could fish a specific area or a specific, brush pile, or like a very specific pattern for, say 10 hours. And out of those 10 hours, you might have 2 to 3 hours where those fish they seem to really be biting, and you can almost like throw anything in there and catch them. But after that window kind of closes, they become very finicky and very hard to catch. So if you get to that point and you're really struggling, some good baits for that are like your wacky rig or your Nico rig and stuff. I'm sure there's going to be some people that are going to be just relying on your forward-facing sonar and kind of throwing like the little ball head minnow style baits over brush, whether it's deep brush or moderate depth. But of course, you're also going to have the glide bait that's become very, very popular. Something I don't dive into a whole lot, but something I probably should do. It's very good for this tournament, especially since you're just looking for one good fish. But ultimately, I think as far as your baits go, you need to fish what you're confident in. You have something tied on that you really, really believe in, that's going to let you slow down, going to let you focus, and it's going to let you put that bait into spots and let it sit, and let the bait work, and try and catch some of those fish. So hopefully you can catch some good fish. We'll see you on the next video, which is probably going to be me fishing this event. So we will see if I do any good, or if any of my my spots are working for me. Hopefully I can cash a couple checks and catch some nice fish. So thanks for watching, guys, and good luck out there.